Here we go, Jonathan. Time for the next segment of the Notable Podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Has it been a hot minute since we did this?
I am struggling these days to keep track of time. It's just
Well, it
being
probably has
honest.
been, but yeah, it's nice to be back and get into another really, really important episode in the life of the great patriarch Jacob.
Yeah, but before you do, thank you to our listeners, those of you who have donated. It's so encouraging just to see that so many of you are willing to think about and make sure that we can continue to do that. We use those funds to buy things like commentaries, and we read a ton of them in order to and text just to be able to prepare ourselves to give these little conversations. So thank you, and if you're listening in, thank you. Share it, give us some stars if you like it. If you don't, you don't have to say anything at all. But this is the Notable Podcast, not because it's notable, but because we're making notes in the margins of our Bibles. Jonathan, go. What are we talking about today?
Well, we're in Genesis chapter 32, and so some of you are going to remember this is going to follow on very neatly from the fact that Jacob has been told by Jesus himself to go out, which is you got to go. And this is we didn't talk about this last time, but nobody should be surprised by this. This is programmatic for the Christian life. Abraham has to leave. Jacob has to leave. Whenever you are called into the Christian faith, you're also called out from lives, idolatrous, hurtful, greedy, lustful lives, to the life of love that God has for us. And so Jacob is in a massive, massive transition here. Uh, we probably got to set this up a little bit more in a second, Timothy, and talk about how, uh-oh, now that he's going back, uh-oh, you know, we gotta set that all up because the thing is, when you go back home, wow, there's things you have to confront there.
It turns out like this takes wisdom to know this, but it turns out that you can't run away from your problems, and you just bring them along with you, and they're waiting right there for you when you return home in a big brother sometimes. And there's there's a note of that here in our lesson in our text for today, this little narrative. So we're picking up last time we took a little chunk of Genesis chapter 31, and we saw how God was really uprooting Jacob out of this really greed infested spiritual yucky environment that he was. And he takes off, and then this is where the account picks it up in Genesis chapter 22. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I think it's too long, but I do want to read, like, invite you all to listen to it. Genesis chapter 32, and we're going to comment and highlight specific verses from verses 1 to 21. But
Yeah, so
especially,
you'll
yeah.
get the whole story. Don't worry. We'll give you the whole story.
And we'll highlight and read specific ones that we want to bring out. But let me just read verse 1 and 2 because it's absolutely stunning, and it's going to set the stage, I think, for giving us handles. And like we talked about that a little last time. Like as human beings, we read these narratives, we want to have handles for them. What can we grab onto? And here's what verses 1 and 2 say. This is the NIV translation. Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named that place Mahanaim. So we're going to do more verses than that, but I think that sets the stage and the foundation for what we want to talk about today. And that is angels.
Well, yeah, we're gonna notice this. We've already noticed this, that angels, okay. Let me just do a little bit of a rant. I've heard a couple people do sermon
I love
series.
rants.
I'm just
Rant.
gonna do it. I've heard people
Better
do.
be a good one. I want a good rant.
I'm doing a. I don't know if it's a good one. No promises, but look, I've heard people do sermon series on Jacob, and one of the big claims that they make about Jacob's life is that there's nothing that people can relate to Jacob. And that's why people like doing sermon series on Jacob sometimes, because pastors feel like it can relate to Jacob. And the reason why is because, unlike, say, a Moses, you don't you don't have people say that you don't have anything supernatural in the life of Jacob. Like, there's no parting of the Red Sea or something like that. And so maybe it feels a little bit more relatable or something like that. And when people say that kind of thing, there's two problems. The first problem has to do with Jacob, and that's that apparently those pastors have not read the Jacob account very closely, because there's angels all over the place, and then we're gonna have to like deal with this very enigmatic scene that is, it's very I don't, I want to
He
use the
meets Jesus, right? Like that's what you get
right,
into.
right. Like, he wrestles Jesus, and it's so, I don't know about that as far as Jacob's lives go.
Well,
But
Jonathan, and he's a prophet too. He sees dreams and visions and stuff like that.
right, 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 right.
I
And
mean,
it's a great point. And then the other piece of it is that on our side, which is, then when pastors talk this way, they're actually helping people, unfortunately so, drain the supernaturalism out of their own life, so that it becomes even more difficult for them to see angels, to see supernatural things happening, and be confident supernatural things are happening in their own life. And that's a problem too. So you're almost like confirming people in misbeliefs. But I ranted, and we're talking about angels, and like, I want to set that all up, just by noticing, like, the world is more enchanted than I think all of us modern people naturally believe. Like, we've kind of been bathed in this, we kind of drink in this atmosphere, the spiritual air, that is just rife with materialism, rife with an empiricism and things like that. But the truth is, the world that God has made is far woollier, and stranger and more beautiful and enchanted than any of us realize. Like, and I think you can even see that through the scientific method, like Hubble versus James Webb. The more advances we make, in telescopic tech, uh, we see further out there, we see further in. Somebody told me, um, that what makes a small thing, like when you examine it under a microscope, for example, um, the difference between what God makes and something synthetic that human beings make is that when God makes something, it gets more interesting the smaller it gets. So you go from cellular structure to what's inside the cells, and so on. And the point is that it's what more wild and woollier, than we think out there. And it's the book of Colossians that is in the New Testament. It's very, very convincing on that, where it says in the book of Colossians that in the Son of God, Jesus himself, all things were created. And and then what Paul does is, when he goes on with that passage, he says, all things in heaven and on earth. So it's very balanced there when he talks about that. Jesus made all things in heaven and on earth. And then he says, visible and invisible, visible and invisible. And then, the passage is really very balanced until Paul continues then, because what Paul does in Colossians is he actually focuses our attention on the invisible. Because what he ends up saying is that there's thrones and there's powers and there's rulers and authorities. Like he has this list that were created by him and for him. So he's helping us understand the invisible powers that are ranked and that are ordered. And what Paul says and what Jesus says and what this story is saying is that there are angels.
There are angels. And uh, specifically, like we're gonna see how many there are, like their order. We're gonna learn a ton about angels just from this little verse. And first of all, like I think in verse one, we're already starting to see it that um the Lord himself gives to Jacob eyes to see this invisible world. And it's actually pretty amazing the way it's a very truncated verse. And I think if I remember right, it's just four Hebrew words actually in verse 1. Like the NIV sort of elongates it when it says the angels of God met him. That is Jacob. And the NIV does a second disservice when it sort of smooths out the word for meet. Um, Robert Alter, we've talked about him before. Robert Alter, he did a pretty famous, I don't know, programmatic translation recently of the entire Old Testament. Now, there's a lot of things that he's a liberal scholar out of California, very beautiful writer, um, brings insight uh, to the Holy Scriptures. Some of the stuff that he says is kind of gross,
Kind of gross.
just like, and for some reason,
He's very
he's,
problematic in some
yeah, this
places.
is just us editorializing a little bit. He sexualizes texts when they shouldn't be. I would say that he's got a little bit of a dirty mind. So, like, this is to say I don't agree with
That's
everything that he
generous
says.
comment, Timothy. That's
Yeah,
generous. But
that he's got a dirty mind.
yeah, a little bit of a dirty mind is what you said, and that's generous. He's pretty gross in some places.
Yeah. So Robert, I like to read him. I like to check out what he's saying about things, and he does. A lot of scholars will use his work um, quite consistently when it comes to the Hebrew. He points out like that the verb for meet is a violent word. It's a very strong word. It's not that you just meet um, somebody. He actually translated the angels of God accosted Jacob. They accosted him. It so they what the Hebrew leads us to picture, and I what Robert Alter I think gives us a little bit of handles for that is it's almost like Jacob arrives at um, a cave at just the right time, and bats. Have you ever seen those creation shows? I hate using the word nature, but those creation shows that where the bats just come out millions at a time and you're like like that, and there some of them are the wings are hitting you and stuff like that. That I think is the image here. It's not that it's not like Jesus with the disciples on the road to Emmaus and it's very kind and um generous and this nice conversation like, hey neighbor, you meet somebody on the road and be like, bye, stuff like that. This is much more in your face, and the Hebrew word does lead us to believe that the angels actually touched him. Um,
And it is
like
plural. It's not touched by an angel, and some people are going to grab onto that if you were alive in the
you have to
90s,
be like a
but
1990s
it's touched by
1990s
angels.
like this Sunday night. show or whatever, touched by an angel, or
Yeah.
somebody's gonna comment in and be like, Timothy, it was Monday nights at 7 or whatever. I don't know. But this is all to say, like, a moment before Jacob wasn't able to discern the presence of angels. Jacob's going back to see his brother. This is a weighty moment for him. He's afraid in so many ways. God opens his eyes and he's able to see that around him are the angels of God.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to talk more about this in a second, but think of the mercy of this. So Jesus is going, or Jacob's going home after being decades away. He's gonna have to face the brother who had said, who had said more than you're dead to me. He actually, his brother said, and this is a direct quote. He said, "I will kill my brother Jacob," and we have every reason to believe he meant it at that time. And so Jacob, this had we're going to find out it haunted Jacob, and he's off to face his death threat. And wonder of wonders, actually, it's not a wonder at all. It is, hopefully, as Christ followers, we get in the story, we start to expect this. But wonder of wonders, God makes sure that he gives Jacob a, a sight of the invisible. He makes the invisible visible for Jacob. And this is it's meant to be a wonderful, wonderful comfort. And here's angels. Keep this in mind, like just to do a little bit of doctrine for everybody who's listening. Angels are perfect. They are perfect in compassion. They are perfect in God's power. You know, they are perfect in God's truth. They have perfect holiness um, that God has given them. And we don't want to miss that fact. Jacob does not miss the fact. You can see it right in his response. And you critiqued the NIV before, but I actually like the way the NIV has it, where it says Jacob responds to the situation and he says, "This is the camp of God," which is, he's actually conflating the angels with God, which isn't, it's not a bad move because he is sensing their holiness. He is sensing their compassion. He's sensing their militaristic power on his behalf. And which leads him into an exclamation. He's looking out over a camp. That's his language. He actually sees, and this is where I want to press on this a little bit. This would be an ordered militaristic camp. Other parts of the Bible would call it a host. This is why in the Samuels, the Lord Yahweh gets the name attached to him, Lord of hosts, Lord of armies. And you see this name further developed and revealed then in the rest of the Holy Scriptures, where God is in charge of this vast, powerful camp of militaristic angels. And this is why, this is one of the reasons, and there's more than one reason for this, but this has got to be one of the reasons why Jacob names this place Mahanaim, which means two camps, because there were indeed two camps. There was Jacob's camp and there was God's camps. There was Jacob and his family, his flocks and herds, and then there was the angel host that was right there camped with him. And so this was meant to be the biggest deal in the world to Jacob, a revelation to him as he heads home.
Yeah, and Jonathan, I think like we have to do this is a really important teaching and doctrine of the Bible, actually. Like this is the doctrine of angels that we're running here too.
Do a little
In
angelology.
in one sense, like maybe for the like this is the definitive moment where we learn like what are God's angels like and what do they do and how are they organized? And and all of a sudden, like we're seeing like, okay, they're an army. They are like don't think campsite like in the Midwest. Think military camp, like all the military imagery that goes along with that. And God is pulling back the veil. This is very special. He's pulling back the veil. They're always there, but we don't always get to see them. There's other stories in the Bible too, like in Second Kings chapter 6. Um, the prophet there is Elisha is with his servant. His servant is terrified, and Elisha's not. And the servant Elisha wants to encourage the heart of the servant. So he reveals to his servant um through prayer. He says to the Lord, open his eyes, Lord, that he may see. And then the Lord opened his eyes. Like this is a second time or a third time where the Lord opens the eyes and he sees the camp of God again, Mahanaim, and it's full of horses and chariots all around, and the invisible becomes visible. And so we're learning about what it means to be a believer and how we can open our eyes up to the same things. Because here's the promise of God to all believers. It says this is actually Psalm 34, verse 7. It says, the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. So, like what the scripture is really wanting to do right here is to rip our spiritual blindness away and to say, open your eyes. The angels are with you right now. The angels are camped around you. And this is if you're really interested in going in, like this is really fun to read some of the dogmaticians on this. I don't know if you've done that before. Like I actually read some of the dogmaticians on this. This is super fun stuff. The dogmaticians actually say this, that the angels are with us in every area of your life. So do they, here's one of the questions, do they intervene in bad government? Yes, yes, they do. Um, does that matter more than your vote? Yes. Yes, yes, it does. Um, do the angels attend church? Yes, they do. So they're involved politically, they're involved ecclesiastically. Are they around your family? Yes, they are. Are they better than your Ring doorbell at seeing and protecting? It's almost as if you have this is so comforting to think about, a never sleeping Navy SEAL team that goes around with every member of your family all the time. Open your eyes and believe, and you will receive the peace that Jacob received in this moment.
Well, look, this is where it you're what you're commenting on is the very plausible idea of guardian angels. And if our listeners don't know this, the place in the scriptures where we get this idea of guardian angels is from Jesus Christ, who is the Lord of the angels. And because he says about the children of believers that this is a direct quote of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew, I believe it says, their angels always see God's face. And so it is this idea, Jesus presenting this idea that the angels who are in charge of believers' children do not have to cut through red tape to get to the Lord. Like you got to report somewhere in the hierarchy somehow. There is no bureaucratic mess. No, their angels go direct, they report, they got a direct report to God. Their angels always see God's face because the Lord, they are that important to the Lord that he's got guardian angels there. And so it becomes a very plausible idea from Jesus that uh, there could be a one-to-one match. There's no doubt that they've got angels, but it I think a guardian angel is this idea that there's a one-to-one match for children. And to push this even a little bit further, thank you for, helping people to understand that angels, we know from the Holy Scriptures that angels are present and act in every economy, the household economy, the national economy, the political economy, the spiritual economy. Um, but I want to add a couple more thoughts just to flesh this out. We know that from the Colossians verse I quoted earlier, we know it from this verse here, that the angels are in fact organized. And we know that archangels are the most important ones. They're ordered, they're militaristic. We know that the prince of the angels is Michael. Michael is the prince of the angels. And we know from the rest of the scriptures a true story that what actually happened in the angelic realm is that war broke out in heaven. What had happened is that a top angel, another archangel, had turned on God and wanted to take God's place. And we learn from Revelation that he's called the ancient serpent, the old dragon, who leads the whole world astray. Sometimes we call him Satan or the devil. And that angel had become a demon and turned on God. And there was war in heaven then. And Michael and his angels fought. And we know from Holy Scripture that Michael and his angels won. And it's said that then a third of the angels were thrown down out of heaven. And so that's the story. And here's something that I want to connect this to this Jacob story. You see this whole host of angels, right? That's what we've already said. And I think it's important for us to understand uh, that there's a lot of angels, Timothy. There's a lot of them. We know that 1/3 of the angels became demons and they're thrown out of heaven, which means that it takes a simple deduction to know then that 2/3 of the angels still fight for God. And this is my chance to say a couple comments. The first is that Michael can take Satan and his demons on and win. He's already done it. And the second comment is that there are more with us than are with them. There's more, now I'm quoting another part of the Bible. There's more with us than are with them. There's more than us than are with them. I, I say that because I think in the modern church, sometimes people are more afraid of demonic influence than they are encouraged by angelic influence. And that is a misbalance. It is an absolute misbalance. And this is where I want to quote Martin Luther, who is commenting on this passage. And one of the things he said is this: ponder in your heart the whole course of nature and of this whole life, and survey every kind of person, cattle, birds, and fish, and you will find more good than bad things. And you will also see that a very small part is subjected to the power of the devil. And so he's commenting on the fact there's more angels than there are demons. And the angels are more powerful than the devil, especially because they are connected to Yahweh, the Lord. And if I could just go on a little bit further, what this means is that Jesus is greater than our sin, and life is greater than death. And Michael's going to be victor over Satan. So all of this is meant to be a mass. I'm trying to, like, Jacob was supposed to be encouraged. We're supposed to be encouraged. We want to open our eyes to this just a little bit more. And I'm pressing on this. I got two last comments, and then I'll be ready to move on to another point. But here's the thing. when it comes to us seeing angels in our lives, there are two possible spiritual problems. And the first is that we think too little of them. And I think I've already given myself away. I think that's probably where 99% of our listeners are. That myself included is that we tend to ignore them. We tend to not sense their presence or know about their presence. And we downplay all of these scriptures that teach us to see the world as enchanted with holy angels who are always there to help us. So that's the first problem, is we can think too little of them. The second problem is that we can think too much of them. When we think too much of the angels, and this was a problem that people around the time of the writing of the Bible seemed to face, is that they would obsess about the angels. They would obsess about their hierarchies and do angelology, and I'm sure there's that kind of junk going on YouTube too these days. Uh, so it can be a problem that you get overly obsessed with angels to the detriment of trusting the help of Christ. But I think that probably most modern Christians are on the other side of that, and we don't think about them enough. The Lord wants us to. Clearly, He wants us thinking about angels.
Well, and in that sense, we're like no different than Jacob. But what Jacob really needed to be able to see was angels, and that empowered him then to do what he did next, and which is to, like, the way the verse goes right after verses 1 and 2, Jacob sees the camp of God, the angels, and we're not told his emotional response. We're gonna get that later, but we see his behavior, so we can take a reading, like, it's sort of like taking someone's temperature. You can take his temperature to see, like, well, what was his spiritual emotional response to seeing the angels. Verse 3 is sort of taking the temperature on that, because what it says is, this is the very next thing that he does right here. This is verse 3. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. So, like, he's on his way. He's going back. Up to this point in his life, he has not attempted to contact his brother. He's had a like his own personal restraining order of protection or whatever. Uh, he's cut communication off. No attempt at communicating with them. He sees the angels. The very next thing that he does is, I've seen God's messengers. Now I will send my messengers to my brother Esau in the land of Seir. So apparently, this is a very encouraging thing for Jacob, as it should have been, as it should have been. Now, things, it's interesting what happens next, because he he tells his brother, "Hey," he tells him, "Use the title, my lord Esau." Jacob takes the title servant. He says, "Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban. I've been there since till now. I have cattle and donkeys and sheep and goats and male and female servants. I'm sending you this message to my lord, that I may find favor in your eyes." And then the messengers come back to Jacob. They say, "We did it. We went to talk to your brother. He's coming, and he's got 400 men with him." And then verse 7 says, now we're going to take his temperature again. In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people. Now, like, I want to be sympathetic and, like, empathetic to Jacob's situation here, because in like, Esau's menacing here, just to put it directly. That was a menacing act by his brother, his twin brother. He could have sent back a verbal message,
I'll
which
give you
is
an alternate interpretation in a second. It at least wasn't warm.
it's menacing. I mean, you can push on that if you want, but like this section of the Bible is so interesting because all the messages being sent are nonverbal. Like God sends a nonverbal message, like the camp of God. Usually it's Gabriel, and Gabriel says something, but oh no, it's a nonverbal message. I'm encamped around you. Esau sends a nonverbal message. He says, I'm coming for you. I've got 400 men. No, like, no verbal message at all. And I'm
Well,
sorry,
then
Jonathan,
look,
it's menacing.
I don't know. I don't know. Let the listeners decide for themselves.
Okay,
I
give me
think
the minority report.
I'll give you, I don't know. Don't put me in a corner like that. It might not be the Minority Report. That's so funny.
It's
Okay.
menacing. Jacob thought it was menacing.
Well, here's a couple points. Ready? So definitely Esau doesn't say anything. So, and that's a problem right away, right? Like, I agree with you there. There's no welcome home, brother. Can't wait to give you a big hug. It's radio silence. And I agree with you. Like, what was Jacob supposed to do with this? Esau's basically this is the equivalent Esau being on his way with 100 Humvees stacked in with guys, four guys in one Humvee. And so this is a standard military action group of that time, 400 guys. And so you can understand, I totally get your point. Maybe it's a minority report, maybe it's the right option. I don't know. It's possible that Esau didn't know what he was going to do. It's possible. It's possible that he's sorting out his options. So maybe it was menacing, but it wasn't on purpose, possibly. We don't
Here's
we don't
here's
know.
another here's another option. I mean, that he is menacing, that he knows what he's going to do, and it's not going to be nice, and that what happens next is Jacob prays. Did I lose you, Jonathan?
No,
I'm just
I'm
going to
here.
keep going. Okay. It could be that Jacob wrestles with God and God intervenes with his angels and changes Esau's intention. But
Well,
that,
right. He
none of
could have
that's in
been
there.
like, and this is going to sound for hopefully like well, I don't know. Some of our listeners may know Touched by an Angel. This isn't cheesy, but it's possible. Like we have angels in action here, and we know that angels influence people. So look, Jacob, here's the story advances like this. Like now people know the options, but the story advances, and what's really tense, if I could put it like that, is that Jacob makes two camps. He actually he makes two camps.
Which
The-
is the meaning of the word Mahanaim.
yeah,
It
and
is,
we made a big deal about that already. Like, and I hopefully like in the back of our listeners' minds, you're starting to see like this is a man who's psychologically falling apart. Like he's already forgotten about Yahweh and his angels. But before we critique him, I want to make like an ancient Christian um, encouragement of the story. One of the things that you realize, like when Jacob separates and creates two camps with his people and herds, what he is doing is he is actually employing an old desert tactic. It actually, and it works like this. Like it's very gruesome to think about this, but it actually isn't a simple matter. The movies make it a simple matter, an easy matter, but it's actually very difficult to kill a whole bunch of people, to pull off a kind of genocide, or a massacre in this case. And uh, so if you put one group in front of another and you separate the two, then these foreign guys would have to be busy killing that group while the other group gets away. So this is a military tactic that Jacob is thinking to employ. And when he does that, like we can't we can't jump on him too hard for that, because it is the Christian understanding of life that we are to use all of our resources, mental, physical, and anything else, to act and heal and move wisely in the world. And so I don't have a critique of Jacob for employing a military tactic in advance of no word from what he had every right to believe was a murderous brother, um, who was very well armed. The piece that Jacob has no excuse for is the spiritual and psychological piece, because he does fall apart here. He absolutely, my question is, hey, Jacob, what happened to the angels? What happened to your heart that was encouraged? What happened? And this is something that I think is easy for us to do, is just to immediately lapse. Like when we come into these times of crisis, and this was a time of crisis for him, we know that we can forget all of the comfort, all the former comfort, encouragement that God had given us. And so here Jacob does the one thing, like, we were kind of doing a survey of angels in the Bible, but like in the Bible, there's a couple things um, that we should never do with angels, or some rules, like when it comes to normal reactions to angels. One is that we fear and tremble in their presence. The shepherds did that out in the field when they encountered the angels at Jesus' birth. The second thing that we're supposed to do with holy angels is obey them. Like when an angel commands you to do something, you need to do it. Lot, we had that story on this podcast, but Lot tried not to obey angels, and he almost got lit up by sulfur because of it. So when an angel gives you a command, when they say jump, do it. They're messengers of God. We need to listen to them. And so Jacob could have been in fear of trembling because of the angels. He could have been obeying the angels here. But here he does the one thing that we should never do with angels, and that's forget about them.
Yeah, there's I just wanted to do a little bit of psychologizing of Jacob's, or at least go a little bit deeper spiritually, like you just did. Walter Brueggemann, who by the way is another, he's for me in that same category as Robert Alter. I love reading Walter Brueggemann. Sometimes I wonder if he's a Christian or not, but he's always provoking in what he says, and I like to check him out. But his comment was stirring on this verse at the beginning of verse 7. He said that the narrator is acutely sensitive to the emotional extremities. Acutely sensitive to the emotional extremities. So you, like, on the front end of the beginning of that verse, we hear about him emotionally. It says not even just fear, but like great fear. So he is, that is, it, I don't even have words for a moment like that. He thinks he's going to die. Like, this is trauma, might be one. Like, it invades his whole heart, great fear. And then we get a description of what that meant from physically when it says that he's in distress. So in great fear and distress. So you got to picture someone who's totally withdrawn in his body. He becomes calculating, despairing. He's uh, almost a peer victim in this moment. And it is something to think about, like, well, why? What does Jacob think happened to the encampment of angels that he had just seen? And here, this is where I'm speculating. I'm going to speculate for a second. And this is never super strong place to come from when you're trying to deal with a man. But I'm thinking, because the rest of the account, like, he goes on and there's a lot of descriptions about this is kind of where I'm basing my speculation. It's almost like he's trying to pay off his brother. He's like he's sending stuff in advance, and like there's this whole game that he's playing with Esau. Um, I'm thinking that Jacob was no longer confident that the angels were with him. And the reason why isn't that he forgot about them. I think he knew full well that God had angels at his disposal for his care and concern. But I'm wondering, and this, like I said, this is speculation, if Jacob felt that he didn't deserve them.
Yeah, he does. We have every reason. I don't think it's speculation to think that Jacob was feeling guilt. That is very clear that he's trying to make some kind of payment here.
We're
Going,
not told that in the text. Like, what we're told is that he's afraid, he's fearful, and that's the emotional piece. He's in distress. That's the like what his body's going through. But I'm thinking that what's happening here is he's carrying a heavy load of guilt that's been unresolved. So he makes this calculating thought, a devastating spiritual thought. God left me. That's
on the other
devastating.
hand,
Yeah.
there's, we can let that speculation stand. On the other hand, what we can know and what we know that the Lord wants us to have a sense of it is the angels. Now I want to just tell a little story and then let this little section stand of the podcast. But there's a movie that I believe it came out on Apple. I saw it on Apple TV, and it's a movie called Greyhound, and it's a war movie about a man who led a convoy across the sea. Um, during a battle that Winston Churchill called the Battle of the Atlantic. And in the Battle of the Atlantic, thousands upon thousands of people died. Um, and they were in these situations where they were in boats where basically they were sitting ducks to German U-boats. And it said that the people leading these convoys against the U-boats had to make decisions in seconds to survive. In Harry, what happens in the movie then is the man who led one of the convoys it was a movie about this man who led them, and it was played by Tom Hanks. And in any rate, what the movie makes very clear is that Jacob is basically the opposite of the man that Tom Hanks played. Because what happens to Jacob is Jacob just falls apart in anxiety, where this man holds firm. And the movie makes it clear why this man was confident and firm in the movie. And I was very touched by it actually when I saw the scene, and I was watching it with my daughter actually. And the way the movie has it is this man who ends up being a war hero. He would get down next to his bed on two knees. And actually, in the scene that's the climax of the movie, he does this again. He's gotten through with the convoy and won. And instead of staying on deck and cheering, he goes to his own private room and he does this thing again, where he grabs his little book and he gets down on two knees and he prays. And he ends up, and what was so moving to me about it is he ends up praying the same prayer that I prayed with my dad every night, our dad every night when we were kids, Timothy. And it's the same exact prayer that millions, I dare say millions of Christians have prayed for hundreds of years now in all kinds of situations. And the end of the prayer goes like this: let your holy angel, let your holy angel be with me, so that the wicked foe may have no power over me. And so even Apple, even Apple TV knows that is what is going to make a man brave is knowing that the Lord's angels are always, always with us.
And I just, we have to do this because the reason why, like, let's say, give me the benefit of the doubt, and let's say that I'm right, that the Jacob had seen the angels, and then all of a sudden he thinks they've blown the coop. You know, they're gone, and it's because of his guilt. Um, and this is why he's thinking Esau's going to come and get me, and so he falls apart. Let's say I'm right for a second. What Jacob is failing to remember actually is the gospel, and to fully understand. Now the Lord's going to help him with that, and really soon. Like, I think that's maybe our next episode. But here's the thing, and this is what we Christians, when we read the story back, we get this confidence that not even our sin can keep God's angels from us. And here's the reason why. And this is a stunning thing to think about. The angels led the fall into sin, right?
Yes, they
The
did.
prince of darkness, like the morning star. And the angels are far superior to human beings in every single way, every single way. Um, and yet some of them are just as fallen, if not more fallen. I mean, we don't have to put as human beings really are. But now think of this, and this is the stunning thing, that God became incarnate, not as an angel. He didn't save the angels. He became incarnate as a human being. And so he makes these mighty creatures that are far superior to human beings in every single way, serve the human being. He loves us. This is all to say. His love, like
Jesus
he didn't
never
take
became
this.
an angel and died for them.
His love for a wicked human race went as far as him not taking angelic substance, but human substance. Um, he- they are far more noble, far more powerful, far more awesome than any of us, but God loves us. He loves you and he loves me. And that's and he makes the angels ministering spirits. So this is all to say, like, we need to not only get confident of the presence of these ministering spirits in our life, but confident that God keeps them there, that God commands them to be there, that God wants them to be there, and that they will always be there. And that even now they are camping around an undeserving, sinful church, family, and person, and they will never leave.
Yeah, they're bound to us now. And my last comments is I just want to share a few gospel thoughts on that. And and it's this, that Jesus, let me start here. Jesus, like you said, Jesus didn't die for the demons. He died for us. And what he does then in the scriptures, you can see that all along the way, that he's the Lord of the angels and they help him. So like in the Holy Scriptures, Jesus is all alone in the desert, 40 days, no food. And the Gospels tell us that angels came and attended him. And we get the same thing in the Garden of Gethsemane. Hopefully, you're starting to get to know angels a little bit better, especially in times of crisis. There in the Garden of Gethsemane, there he's getting blood squeezed out of him because he's under so much pressure. And we know that while the disciples abandoned Jesus, an angel came. An angel came, we're told. I actually read one pastor that said, when I get to heaven, that the first thing that he wants to do after he meets Jesus is, I want to go find that angel who helped Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. I thought that was kind of a cool thought. But then this is what happens. Then the dark hosts come for Jesus after the Garden of Gethsemane, right? In the dark of night, the dark hosts come. And this time, the disciples abandon him. And Jesus could have used the angels, but he didn't. He explicitly said, do you think that I cannot call on my Father and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? By the way, that's 72,000 angels by my count, which is, to put it in perspective, that's, if I have my numbers right, that's 29 times as many U.S. Navy SEALs that are currently in service. 72,000 angels, Jesus names. They're all at his command. They're all to his glory. They're all to his strength. But he does not do it. Why not? God loves sinners so much that Jesus did not avail himself of the help of angels. When he was at the point of death, he was left to die. That was the plan. He gave up the protection of angels so that we would always have them, even though we don't deserve them. We would always have them. I told it like this to my church, that his son, God's son, dies for us, and his angels fly for us. And they fly for everybody. Everybody who's listening, everybody who's listening, everybody who's listening.
There's some pretty cool. Maybe I'll just leave this image with people. There's some pretty cool art artwork that's been done to kind of help us imagine, have like a scriptural imagination, if you will. I grew up with a painting in my house. You probably remember where it's sort of this um, forest scene with a path running down the middle. And there's a bridge going over a brook. And there's two little kids they're leaning over the bridge to pick a flower. And you can tell that one of them's about to fall off. And there's this beautiful sort of translucent, um, little bit transparent angel that's right behind the kids, making sure that they're going to be okay. And it's not like we're making this stuff up just to make ourselves feel better. It 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 actually is the teaching of the word that says this is a real thing. And I don't know about you, Jonathan, but I've had countless conversations with people say, when this topic comes up, like, have you ever had one of those moments? It's just inexplicable where something really should have went wrong. And then for some reason that that you're like, it didn't. And you can't account for it scientifically, but everything turned out way better than it should have. Everybody's got a story. I got my stories. I got my stories. And so like this is really helping to fill in and helping us to see, okay, this is this is real. This is peace. This is God's way of protecting us and ministering to us.
And it will be like that. The angels will be like that until until our own end, until the end. Jesus is going to come with the holy angels, but at our end, it is the great privilege of the angels that when a Christian dies and the soul is the spirit, our spirit is separated from our body, and our spirit enters whatever that spirit world is, that the angels, Jesus taught us that the angels, he sends the holy angels to bring us through that spirit world to God, wherever that is, however that is. And then we will be made forever like the angels. We won't be angels, but we will be, according to Jesus, like them forever in holiness and truth and love and glory.
Next time, like strangely enough, we're not done talking about angels.
We can't be.
We we're gonna get into one specific angel next time. So come on back. Excited about it.